Right. So I think we're going to get started because it's 4 o'clock. So welcome to everyone, and welcome to our fellow Torontonians. I hope, yeah. Okay, woo, Canada.
Go
Awesome. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope everyone is enjoying the conference thus far. My name is Sarah Hill, and I am a senior consultant with Lord Cultural Resources. And I'm pleased to be presenting today with my colleague, Mila Deshef-Tweddle from Nordicity.
It's really hard to say that, by the way. So she did
I've
great.
practiced. We've worked together a little bit. So we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started on our session today around culture, cities, and digital technology, obviously with that lens of collaboration. And us being a great example of collaboration as well. So Lord Cultural Resources, we are a planning firm for cultural institutions. We work globally. We've got 6 offices thus far. We're headquartered in Toronto, but we also have a New York office and an office here in California, in Long Beach, just outside of Los Angeles. And we work predominantly with cultural institutions, so museums, art galleries, gardens, archives, libraries, historic sites, you name it. We have probably done it in the almost 40 years that we've been in business. And we offer a range of services from exhibition and interpretive planning to facility planning, as well as strategy and business development. And we've also seen, obviously, as digital is quite cross-cutting, the need to embed that into our practices and services as well. And so these are just some recent digital initiatives that we've been working on. And we've also been working quite collaboratively with our partners at Nordicity on a number of our digital projects. And I'll let Mila introduce herself.
Yeah, so Nordicity is a consulting firm. We specialize in strategy, policy, and economic analysis for the creative and cultural industries. And also we work in, well, my colleagues in our Ottawa office work in the telecom sector. Similarly, firm's been around 40 years. We have 4 offices, 3 in Canada, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Toronto, and 1 in London in the UK. There you go.
So for our today's session, we're looking at 3 different case studies that we've been working on together, Nordicity and Lord, or sometimes what we've now fondly termed Lordicity or something along those lines. So these 3 projects are funded through the Digital Strategy Fund, which is a grant fund from the Canada Council for the Arts. So we'll just kind of give you an overview of what that is, and we'll go through each of the different case studies, just kind of what it is, who's been involved, and try and kind of pull out some of the highlights around collaboration and some of the challenges around collaboration. And we've got a couple of videos as well, some words from our partners, if you will. So I'll turn it over to Mila to kick things off.
Next slide. So first things first, let's give you guys a little bit of context. As Sarah mentioned, we just wanted to give you an overview of the digital strategy, what the Digital Strategy Fund is. We're pretty lucky in Canada. Sorry, I feel like no one can hear me. Relatively speaking, just because we do have a pretty good public funding ecosystem, although we love to complain about it, and there's always room for improvement, but still. So we have this federal arts council called the Canada Council for the Arts, for those of you who do not know. And they launched something called the Digital Strategy Fund back in 2017. And I'm just going to take a second to tell you guys a little bit about what that is all about, since it is definitely the financial driver behind some of the initiatives that we're going to talk to you about today. And also, I forgot to shout out to the City of Toronto, who also supported 2 of the initiatives we're going to talk about. So what is the Digital Strategy Fund? Basically, in 2016, the Canada Council commissioned a study called The Arts in a Digital World, which was completed by Nordicity. And based on kind of the findings from that research, they developed and launched this new Digital Strategy Fund. And it's essentially an $88.5 million investment over 5 years. For those who don't speak in Canadian dollars, that's $67 million US dollars at the current exchange rate. Want to change maybe sometimes. And they just finished their 3rd intake of applications this past September. In the first year, they supported about 114 projects, and in year 2, they supported a total of 42 projects. We haven't done an in-depth analysis of what, the size of those projects are necessarily, but the assumption is that they're probably larger scale projects in year 2. But basically, the goal of the Digital Strategy Fund is to stimulate the digital transformation of the arts sector in Canada. And their overarching guiding principles and values for the fund are to support projects that embody collaboration, partnership, and networking, open-mindedness, and a willingness to share knowledge, results, ideas, and lessons learned. And there's an emphasis on experimentation, risk-taking, and iterative development. And basically, they're just trying to support or enable a kind of system-level transformation of the arts and culture sector. So they don't necessarily want organizations going off and doing kind of one-off projects here and there individually. They're really just trying to support a collaborative approach and a transformative approach that gets at the heart of how the sector is operating. The fund is structured into 3 streams. The digital literacy stream is all about building digital capacity and knowledge and supporting projects that focus on research and experimentation. The public access stream is about supporting projects that develop and explore new models of engagement, new approaches to sharing and discovering. And the transforming organizational models stream focuses on developing and exploring new digital ways of working, exploration and implementation of new approaches for managing digital workflows and processes, so that they can, these organizations can thrive in a digital world. And basically why it's important is it's providing a really critical investment of resources into the sector that was identified as a core need to allow the sector to kind of make that digital transformation and make that a priority in what they do. And when you're, when you're focusing on keeping the lights on and doing your special projects and doing the day-to-day, it's hard to find the resources to embark on really transformative research and development at the scale, certainly at the scale that the Canada Council is hoping to support. So that's why it's been such a kind of critical thing in the sector. It's also important because the collaborative approach helps build strength at the sector level. It's forcing the sector to kind of collectively take pause and think strategically about how to arm themselves to navigate the challenges and opportunities that are presented by the digital world, both present and future, actually. It's quite future facing, and that's a really critical piece because it's helping shift the culture and mindset of the sector to be more agile, experimental, and kind of just be poised to continue to evolve and transform with the digital environment. And the fund is also helping arts organizations adapt to the digital environment in 3 ways. So building knowledge, skills, and capacity, transforming workflows, and pushing them to think strategically about digital opportunities. And finally, what's interesting is the fund is also having this kind of albeit intended, but spillover impact, which is that it's actually also helping to improve access and engagement and participation in the arts, which is also one of their kind of core objectives.
So we consider ourselves pretty lucky in that regard, but we should say that those that are eligible for the fund are Canada Council members, and so it's a lot to do with the arts, performing arts, visual arts, and not-for-profit organizations operating in that field. But that also includes our art galleries. And so some of our museums kind of that have art collections kind of fit into that category as well. So not all museums in Canada are eligible for the fund, but there are a certain number of museums that are. So the first case study we have for you is our Toronto Arts of Tomorrow initiative, or sometimes we fondly call TATI. We have some strange acronyms going on. It becomes kind of confusing sometimes. This was the first project that was funded through the Digital Strategy Fund. And it was initiated by Nordicity with support from LORD. And we, as a team, really helped to shape that funding application, but also to bring on board those not-for-profit organizations within the realm to participate in the project as well. And the main thrust was really looking at how we might help Toronto's really established arts organizations operate more effectively in a digital world. And so this was a kickoff project. This was really what's gotten everything started. There had been discussions previously amongst the groups, although if you operate in Toronto, sometimes they're more competitive than they are collaborative. And so this was really a way of bringing people together around common issues and to start thinking about more of a collaborative work ethic. So here are the partners that were involved. As I mentioned, we have a solid consulting team in Nordicity, Lord, and OCAD-U, which is the Ontario College of Art and Design based in Toronto. And our funders, of course, with support from the City of Toronto through the Economic Development and Culture Department. And for these types of applications to the Canada Council, we have to have a lead applicant that is one of the members and a not-for-profit organization. So the Harbourfront Centre took that lead in this case. They're a multidisciplinary arts venue on the waterfront in Toronto. And then we had 11 other participating organizations. And they range from things like national organizations like the National Ballet of Canada and the Canadian Opera Company, as well as other provincial organizations like the Art Gallery of Ontario, the AGO, and more Toronto-centric organizations, so the Toronto Symphony Orchestra or the Toronto International Film Festival. So you got a range of different partners here. And we won't talk too much about the project process overall. Lord and Nordicity were the ones really the project managers for this, kind of facilitating, brokering, working on all of the nitty-gritty admin and project management stuff. And just kind of to frame out our collaborative process, we had partnership agreements, which were really important in calling out who was responsible for what and what the expectations were for being involved. Obviously, regular calls and meetings and various email communications at this point. And then I'll talk a little bit about the strategic foresight workshop, but that's where we really came together for the big main collaborative event. And so we started, this process was really fantastic for us as consultants as well, because it gave us an opportunity to also participate in the experimentation and the learning process. And so the environmental scan was really important. It helped us kind of get a good grounding in what was going on in arts and culture and how that intersected with the digital world. And vice versa. But it was also really important to bring to our partners to make sure everyone was working from a common base of knowledge, and so that everyone could participate in the discussion and it could be inclusionary that way. But it was also providing inspiration for the workshop. And so our strategic foresights workshop was led by our OCAD-U partners at their facility. And I can't emphasize this enough, that we are so proud that we had participation from over 30 people on a single day from all of our partners. Like, that's kind of a miraculous undertaking in and of itself to get arts leaders from across Toronto in a room for that long. And so we were all exploring what these kind of scenarios about what would Toronto's arts and culture look like in 2025. And then we were working together to brainstorm strategies for each of the scenarios and kind of looking for commonalities amongst the partners so that we could build consensus and then go forward with a few key projects that we wanted to work on and apply to the next round of digital strategy funding. And so in terms of achievements, of course, the grant award was fantastic, and that financial support from the City of Toronto really helped legitimize things, as well as the commitment from the leaders and decision makers across those big arts organizations. But what really came out of it was 5 viable projects that everyone agreed to in the room, and 3 of those went forward for digital strategy fund applications in the second round, and they all 3 won additional funding support. And so we were looking at things like a joint arts marketing initiative that would leverage digital technologies to do that, some sort of arts analytics collective, kind of like the audience agency in the UK that we heard about this morning, one around content distribution and innovation, really kind of exploring what content is and how it's managed and stored. There was kind of a spin-off project that way. And then the Knowledge Factory, a way of sharing the knowledge. So challenges, obviously finding time was pretty difficult, especially for us trying to coordinate all of these leaders. And the leadership was in flux in Toronto at that point. We saw a number of changes at the CEO level for these organizations. But I think mostly it was the kind of multiplicity of digital plans that each organization had. Of course, they were all at different levels of digital maturity coming into this process, and they all had things in the works. So when we were trying to brainstorm joint activities, we also had to keep those in the back of our mind at the same time. And then, again, competition, like I said, can sometimes get in the way of collaboration, but I think actually things went very well. And so we don't want you just to take our word for it. We have a couple of words from our partners. And so this is a little bit of a longer video, but I think it should be okay.
Relationship to cultural organizations is frequently defined almost exclusively by offering a grant. But frankly, the grant is probably just a single part of it, and we need to think more deliberately about other aspects of our relationship. It's our convening power, how we help people navigate the regulatory environment. The city touches everything. We thought that the city could act as perhaps an honest broker, bring organizations together, demonstrate the city's good faith by putting money on the table, and try to have organizations collaborate while demonstrating the significance of the opportunity that they faced with the Digital Strategy Fund of the Canada Council. It was an overwhelmingly positive experience. I think in large measure to the quality of the interveners, Nordicity, Lord, OCAD, who came together to add rigor to the process. Too frequently, people are brought together in this type of situation with rather ill-defined goals and a really diluted sense of leadership. So those common problems were solved up front, and that helped a lot. So that was a strong positive. We began to get a sense of the emerging leadership within our organizations around digital change. So we frequently cite the National Ballet of Canada, the leadership there, how their CIO occupies a seat at the strategic leadership table. The National Ballet operates with a very much a digital first mindset. And we found that it exceeded our hopes, that that leadership emerged at the table. Other organizations perhaps who hadn't had the resources or the ability to contend with digital as much as some of the more advanced organizations were able to learn from and look at what their own needs were and how they might be addressed through a more fulsome approach to digital strategy. So that was an unanticipated but significant benefit by the end. Us as the city convening, not having been clear enough about exactly why we're asking people to come. We thought that we were by talking about the Digital Strategy Fund, but one always forgets the baggage that, that one brings to any meeting. So we realized quite quickly that people, instead of sending sometimes their digital strategy folks, were sending their government relation folk because they thought they were being called to a meeting by the city to talk about some of the things the city usually talks about, scarcity of funding or the need for a new evaluation framework. And perhaps we might have done better to clarify that it was none of those things. I was very happy to see organizations collaborate more easily and across scale. We had always had a table that convened Toronto's largest cultural organizations, euphemistically titled the Group of Eight. And they had done a good work in setting the cultural policy agenda locally for some time. I think this process has begun to create connections between organizations at different scale. There will always be specific conversations that are going to need to pertain to those largest cultural institutions. But here, I think they realize a sense of commonality with some of the smaller ones who are wrestling with similar issues. So I think that's been great.
The particular thing that was exciting about the Toronto Arts of Tomorrow initiative was the digital potential it seemed to me to offer. It seemed to me very timely. We were at a stage when arts organizations throughout Toronto, a lot of them were doing very good, very strong digital things, either creating and distributing terrific content or using analytic tools. But they were all doing slightly different things. They were doing them in ignorance of one another to some degree. And the proposition behind this project is to bring a lot of those things together to form connections between different arts organizations of all scales, big and small, performing arts, visual arts, right across the art spectrum, with the aim that we'll get to a place where all those skills level up. Remember that great moment when Henry Kissinger once said about dealing with Europe, if I want to talk to Europe, who do I telephone? And there's a little bit like that. If the arts community in Toronto wants to talk to a Google, or wants to talk to an Alphabet, or wants to talk to some major national or international player to achieve some benefit for the sector as a whole, we can't do that as 20 or 30 separate arts organizations. We have to do that in some coordinated way. What hasn't quite worked yet, and I would emphasize the yet because we'll get there, is we've got great energy in the separate projects, but what we haven't quite figured out yet is the way to keep them well connected with one another and keep some sort of central coordination, but not in a way that inhibits the developments of the separate projects. And that's today's work in progress. The most profound result is creating a single, joined up sense of a family of people working in the cultural industries in this really astonishing city, all absolutely committed to the growth and the health and the expansion and the deepening and the excitement of living in this city. And that'll in the end be the most precious outcome of this journey.
So thanks to Patrick Tobin at the City of Toronto and Anthony Sargent at Luminato. And now Mila will speak about our second case study.
Yes, the Canadian Arts Discoverability Initiative, also affectionately known as CADI, again, with the acronyms. That's not our greatest strength.
But rhyming.
Rhyming is, yeah. This project or initiative brought together 6 multidisciplinary arts organizations from performing arts, across performing arts and art galleries, or it includes performing arts organizations and art galleries from across Canada. And it's basically to explore new approaches for boosting discoverability of Canadian art worldwide in partnership with local municipalities. And then the crux of it is kind of leveraging big data that municipalities are collecting or could be collecting on behalf of the sector. The kind of objectives of the initiative were to build an understanding of the core principles and approaches of digital discoverability, to build literacy and comfort with data analytics, and help transition these organizations towards kind of more of a data-driven decision-making. Speaking of which, the third objective is, or the primary goal really was to help these organizations transform institutional thinking so that they're embedding digital discoverability at the heart of their planning, decision-making, and creation of products or programs. And ultimately, we're also working towards identifying a series of pilot projects that could go on to be developed and implemented, and that's kind of the experimental side of things, and hopefully that phase 2 will be successfully funded. We're waiting with bated breath. So as I mentioned, we brought together, I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but we brought together 6 partners. Beaverbrook Art Gallery out in New Brunswick, for those of you familiar with Canadian geography.
The Maritimes, on the east.
The Maritimes, East Coast. The Musée des Beaux-Arts de Montréal, or Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. The Art Gallery of Hamilton. Red Sky Performance, which is an Indigenous performing arts institution based out of Toronto. The Winnipeg Art Gallery, and the Greater Vancouver Professional Theatre Alliance. West Coast, so spanning quite a geography there. And we also have a number of municipal partners that have been involved in this process. So Tourism Montreal, Tourism Winnipeg, City of Fredericton in New Brunswick, the City of Toronto, and the Vancouver Economic Development Corporation. And then we have us, the consulting team, who are kind of facilitating this whole process, as Sarah so eloquently explained with regards to TADI, so I won't repeat it. Again, we love process, so we are explaining the process, but I won't actually take you through all of this. As with the other project, we started with an environmental scan to provide a little bit of an overview of discoverability and the different moving pieces that are part of that process or journey. Data, content, platform, phygital, which I think was on the previous slide, and what the different approaches are to discoverability. And then we conducted, the kind of key touch points, I think, throughout this process is really what we should focus on here is we conducted these capacity and needs interviews with each of the participating organizations. We just wanted to kind of understand what problems they're trying to solve, or I actually prefer to frame it as like what opportunities are they trying to seize. It's certainly, you could frame discoverability as a problem, but we found that framing this as an opportunity kind of helped get people to to that kind of aspirational mindset that we were looking for, rather than staying stuck in the pragmatic of trying to solve an immediate problem or urgent problem. And then we facilitated some site visits that brought together the arts organizations and their local municipal partners to discuss where there might be kind of synergies with the priorities and opportunities that we'd identified with each of the participating institutions. And that was just a chance really for the municipality to kind of talk about what they're doing and what kinds of data they're collecting and what strategies they're using to either boost cultural export or boost tourism, depending who we were talking to. And those the participants kind of got a better understanding of what the city was doing and what data they might be collecting that could be used by them to meet their objectives. And then we had a project identification workshop where we brought everyone together virtually by video conference to present and discuss the emerging kind of project ideas that came out of those site visits. It was really kind of to vet and validate what was emerging as like the key ideas. And then the next step is going to where the match is going to happen, which I'll talk about a little bit more detail in a second, is we'll be going to do a full day co-creation summit later this month with OCAD. That's going to be facilitated by them. And from there, we'll kind of be able to refine the project designs, and hopefully, as I mentioned, in phase 2, if we can secure the funding, we'll be able to develop the detailed project plans and go on to kind of develop and implement these pilots. The process did change slightly because we had some changes in grant deadlines. So that forced us actually, that video conference step, the virtual project identification workshop, was an added step that we had to put in there so that we could at least have something to put in to apply for the funding to support, just because of the lag time in the funding cycle. So yeah, that was kind of an added step. So I mentioned the co-creation summit coming up later this month. It's really where, like I said, the magic is going to happen. It's going to take these project concepts from like that conceptual idea space, and it's going to concretize them a bit more. It's going to take them from that blue sky aspirational space into the real world. We're going to see which ones kind of hold water and have the most potential when you really kind of test them. And we anticipate that most likely at the end of that process, we're going to go from kind of six projects to probably down to 3 or 4 or less or more, who knows, but that's probably where we're going to land. And we're going to basically, that session is going to be used to establish the core assumptions surrounding the project. So we'll discuss what the requirements are to make these projects happen using the Moscow method. So must have, should have, could have, will never have. We're going to examine and debate the value proposition of each project. So that's for the organizations as well as the partners and the end user. And it'll be a chance for us to identify and examine the precursors. Are we duplicating something that already exists? Does it make more sense to piggyback onto something that's already happening? What would the project be adding to the landscape, or is it filling a gap or truly kind of meeting a need? To do that, we're basically going to be using a scorecard to evaluate each of these project concepts. That's going to look at 3 criteria. So desirability, which is the impact of the end users, audiences, organizations, municipality. The feasibility, so that's access to resources and capabilities, so technical feasibility and financial feasibility. And then viability, which is like, can these be scaled and sustained? Do they fit strategically, within the context in which they're being implemented?
A little bit more quickly, I think.
Yeah, sure. Achievements. So similarly, we got a big chunk of funding to develop this project. We also count the 6 preliminary project concepts as major achievements, especially because we're so early in the process. So I'm not going to list through all of them, but we've got some really interesting stuff on the table. One of them is going to be exploring how to use municipal public Wi-Fi hotspots to both collect data about visitors and their profiles and their movement patterns across the city, and then also to send targeted content and messaging based on those patterns. And then another great one is the idea of we're going to be creating and implementing a joint digital marketing campaign that will bring together Indigenous works from across disciplines and institutions in the country to help position Indigenous art as a pillar of the Canadian art canon and promote it internationally. And then some other great outcomes are, that we've sort of really catalyzed these stronger relationships with municipal partners. Many of these organizations already had relationships with their municipal partners, but they're kind of, as Pat Tobin actually alluded to, they tend to be limited to kind of a funding relationship, or it's sort of more of an acquaintance. And it wasn't really at the level of like that depth of partnership. So this process has helped them build a collaborative partnership. And then
challenges?
Yes, and then the challenges were building and maintaining buy-in on something that's very conceptual. A lot of these folks were really pragmatic, and they were kind of really struggling to sort of get on board with something that felt very out of reach and not clearly defined. Collaborating across 5 time zones and 4,000 kilometers or almost 3,000 miles. Turns out that collaborating across a vast country is really hard. So we use some digital collaboration, but bringing folks together is really going to be what kind of brings everything together. Collaboration across disciplines and size and capacity. It's hard to find the common ground. It's also hard to find the solutions that are kind of context agnostic and that allow them to be scaled and implemented in different contexts. And then Sarah mentioned also varying degrees of digital maturity, which is, I think something that's coming up with all of these initiatives. And then the other one was prioritizing institutional agenda over kind of sector collaborative needs. It was a struggle to get people kind of beyond their most immediate needs to think about the sector as a whole. So.
And we've got just a couple of comments from the Beaverbrook Art Gallery and the Winnipeg Art Gallery as well.
Certainly the gallery as a whole works very closely with its municipal partners, but having the opportunity to meet with a different division than we normally work with was certainly an interesting feature of CADI for us. And just getting a sense of what initiatives they are working on at the municipal level, what data they are able to collect at the municipal level, and getting that toehold into another side of the world that we're not used to working with was certainly an advantage for us.
One of the lows is the fact that it seemed to be a very conceptual project, and the conceptual element, while being very good, the project also requires some specific deliverables, and we didn't see the technological interface with the grand vision. And we hope as the project evolves, that idea and form or execution can become better integrated so that we see how you actually do this. Well, in the first instance, it was pretty frightening, might be the right word, that it seemed to be more capacity than we actually had to manage such a complicated and vast project over territory and expertise. But working with our private sector partners and our public sector partners, it was more fluid than I expected.
I think it's certainly helped us maintain digital as a key consideration in the organization's life. We haven't seen yet too many changes reflected in workflows, but it's certainly something that is more and more present in our conversations. So it has helped buoy the question of digital and keep it at the forefront of all of our minds as we do move forward. So I would say it's helping us prime the organization for the next digital step.
The way I got involved because the timing was ideal with the opening of the Inuit Art Center. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to explore discoverability of our Inuit art collection, as well as the discoverability of our wider collection. We're mandated to increase access to all of our collections here at the WAG. And this just sounded like a great opportunity to share insight with other institutions across Canada and collaborate a little more. It definitely helped us align our focus on discoverability with our municipal partner here, Tourism Winnipeg. So the meeting that we had in person when you guys came out, while we already have a really great working relationship with tourism, it allowed us to see what they do in terms of discoverability and some of the software they use. And we learning about their processes kind of helped us to see where we would potentially better fit in to their systems to increase our own discoverability as a gallery. In terms of the Inuit Arts Center, we're kind of constantly looking to make that bridge between South and North in Canada and in Manitoba. And in the process of meeting with you guys, we were actually set up with the Pingwak Association, which is a Northern organization. And we've connected since you guys set us up. And we're hoping to collaborate with them in the near future. So I mean, that's a very obvious, tangible outcome, but I do see once we meet in person with the other organizations, more collaboration coming.
Right, so thanks to Tom and Jeremy and to Amy as well. And so our last case study is a shorter one because this is a work in progress. This is our Digital Reach project, which was a tatty baby, but National Ballet of Canada rightly rebranded it as Digital Reach. And this one had, so this was one of the spin-off projects from the TATTY project, the Toronto Arts of Tomorrow initiative that we talked about at the beginning. And this one revolved around content, and it was looking at exploring what content is exactly and how these cultural organizations of varying sizes can take advantage of screen technologies and content and kind of match them together to reach new audiences. And again, looking at collaborative solutions to take forward. And what we really found from, again, this is exploratory, but what we found from the research, and when we're talking about content for arts and culture organizations, we kind of split it into content big and content small. And so when we talk about content big, that was kind of like the feature, the main feature, the performance, the concert, the exhibition. And then when we were talking about content small, that was all of the other associative content that goes along with it, the behind the scenes videos, the interviews, the blog posts, and all the like. And again, so we've got a number of different partners. This time we've brought in a tech partner, the Sheridan College, through their Screen Industries Research and Training Center, and I'll show you a little bit more about them in the future. Of course, National Ballet of Canada is spearheading this one in collaboration with the Canadian Opera Company, because there's two parallel projects going on, Digital Reach and Digital Stage. And again, we've got a number of different organizations of varying size. This is our first multi-phase project, and so we're in phase 1 for 2019, and we'll be going into phase 2 next year and phase 3 in 2021. And this initial stage has really been exploratory, like I said, doing research, and for us on both of our organizations' parts to kind of better understand what all of this means and how it impacts the arts, and then going through some informal workshops and learning with our partners. And then again, looking to collaboratively develop some pilot projects, which we can prototype and work through and formalize and sharing. And then we're experimenting with more virtual collaboration tools. So a project management tool like Asana has been working very well for bringing all documents together and people in one place. And of course, we all live in the same city, but sometimes it's tough to get to one another for meetings. So we've been using Zoom. You've seen our application and our video elements today, but it's been working out pretty well. And so we've been crossing over with the Digital Stage project. Again, the Digital Strategy Fund is all about sharing as well. That's one of the key kind of drivers, as well as collaboration. So they hosted a symposium recently, which we and all of our digital reach partners attended. And their project is looking more at a deeper dive into technology and how to use it throughout the production of arts performances, whether that's theater or music or whatnot. So for full stages of planning, from pre-planning and visualization through to, how do we incorporate that on stage and develop other content from that. And so what I am really looking forward to is these site visits to the CERT Center. It's located at Pinewood Studios in Toronto, and it was originally designed to help the screen industries prototype and experiment with technology so that they didn't have to invest heavily in these technologies. They could just come to the center and kind of play with it to see if it worked out and if there was proof of concept for what they were thinking, and then they could go away and release an RFP and have it go into further development. And now they've realized, oh, hey, maybe the arts organizations would like to get on board with this. And so we've got a couple of different workshops coming up where we'll explore the equipment that they have there. So virtual reality, motion capture, AR, and projection mapping. And like I said, this is our first multi-phase project, and so it's quite big, 3 years and a much bigger grant. I think one of the biggest things over the course of the projects that we've been working on is that our project partners, our arts and culture partners, are developing more confidence throughout the process, and so they're taking on more of a leadership role with project management and things like that. And we've been able to connect with other tech partners and other people further downstream to help us kind of put things together. Challenges, of course, it's finding scalable solutions for all of our partners because they are big and small, and content as its concept is quite broad in nature. And then that prototyping thing, the Digital Strategy Fund doesn't allow for paying for equipment and subscriptions and things like that, so it's kind of difficult to get proof of concept in some of these cases. And then maintaining momentum. And so I just got this last video, and then I think we've got time for a wrap up and some questions.
For us at Tapestry, we believe really deeply in partnership and in collaboration. I think with any project, no matter what it is, there is an inherent value in people coming together and sharing perspectives and working with other people who have different entry points into the conversation. With a project like this, we are together attempting to address a challenge that faces the entire sector, and not just our sector. Performing arts as a whole, right, that crosses the boundaries of individual art forms within there with geography. And I think the only way to address a challenge like that is for us to work together. We are on the smaller end of the spectrum of companies who are involved here. And so it's really worthwhile for us to partner with larger organizations. And we both bring something really different and really valuable to the table when it's a circumstance like that. We are highly experimental. We're an unusually experimental company, asking why this is being done this way or what other possibilities are out there. That can be really useful in addressing big challenges. So we thought we would have something to contribute to the conversation from that side. And because there are so many big companies involved in this, we knew that we would have things to learn from companies working in different art forms with different models and with such a huge range of budget sizes. So the stability and the industry knowledge and staff support and things like that coming from the larger organizations, and the habit of questioning and the agility coming from us, that can be a really potent mix. Like many arts organizations of our size, like we have pretty limited digital engagement just because it's so expensive to do. And the resources to support branching into digital engagement and content in that way don't really exist, at least for us in Toronto. And so the possibility of, if the project becomes a sort of collaboratively owned group bank of digital strategy experts, or if it becomes a shared equipment library or database of people who will do digital work at a reduced cost for arts organizations, or a pool of expertise that comes from all of our organizations already that is magnified by our proximity to one another. I think the possibilities here, because we're working together, are much broader and much more impactful than anything we can do separately. And we are all trying to do it separately and not getting as far as we will together. I hope that we will get to a point where we are all able to use the digital content that we create to augment our very analog art form of performing arts, that rather than as a sector seeing the digital arena as something that is taking time and attention away from the kind of art that we create, that we can start to integrate it more meaningfully, that it can become an ally to us instead of a competitor, because it's not going away, obviously. And we must be able to work within the world as it is now, you know, we must be able to adapt.
So thanks to Jamie from Tapestry Orchestra for that. So what? We have a few key takeaways and final thoughts for you, but I think we've got about, there's 12 minutes left. But, I mean, you can see them. So I want to just make sure that there was time to allow for questions and things like that. So we'd love to hear any of your questions or thoughts.
Or come find us later if you want.
Yes, that's true too.
We're around.
Anyone?
No, go for it.
Yes.
So I understand that theoretically, like the different kinds of partnerships that you've had. Can you tell us a little bit more about the partnership relationship with OCAD University? So where working with like an arts education institution fit in to these projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. They're technically, the OCAD partner is part of the consulting team. So we're actually working, we're working with OCAD UCO, which is kind of their like design thinking shop arm of the university. So it's not quite the academic part of the university, but yeah, they basically are providing some of the kind of expertise around facilitating the strategic foresight session or the co-creation sessions and things like that for us.
Yeah, and the strategic foresight section, that was specifically from their strategic foresights program, which is slightly different than the design thinking process that we're using for CADI. The foresight one is definitely trying to think future scenarios and what might happen and then try to develop strategies to kind of meet that, whereas the CADI one is more, we've got ideas already in place, and so it's using the design thinking process to
like a proof of concept
to
process
develop those in more detail. So what they're really providing is that kind of that process and that sort of facilitation of those workshop elements.
Yep.
Welcome. Anyone else?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I was wondering if that was sort of more platforms thinking, like where are we actually going to distribute this content, or if it was sort of the planning around who is going to develop this content, if that happens that early on.
Yeah, so that's the kind of project as part of TATI that became the Digital Reach project. And so again,
it was rebranded.
Again, it was, in the first instance, from our perspective, in terms of grounding the project, it was trying to figure out what we meant by content, and that's kind of where we came up with the big and small idea. And then it was also trying to investigate a number of different avenues, because there's kind of like, it's a very iterative process and chicken and egg sort of thing going on, where you've got content and you've got platforms and you've got your audiences. And so we were trying to understand what other arts organizations out there were developing in terms of content and how they were using it, both in terms of engaging and like, you know, in terms of visitor engagement. Were they just informing them? Were they using it to try and get them involved in a conversation? And then also on the other side, where I think arts and culture haven't really quite gotten farther along in that sort of process, is how could they monetize some of the content? Because there's so much content that's required right now, and there's so much effort that needs to be put into planning. So thinking about the fact that you're going to develop content or need content even before you get started. So you're filming those behind the scenes things, you're documenting how the exhibition gets put together or installed, so you have those content pieces. And so they're trying to figure out, what is content, and what are other arts and cultural organizations creating in terms of content. But then on the platform side of things, it was like, how are the different platforms people using these days to communicate, actually informing the different types of content that's being created. So if you look at something like Instagram stories, so one of the examples we were using for our research was New York City libraries. They've actually used that stories feature to create Insta stories, and so they're using copyright-free materials like Alice in Wonderland to actually allow you to read Alice in Wonderland through Instagram stories, and there's different artists involved, and there's animations, and so that platform has informed the type of content that they've created. And then the other thing that we were trying to get to grips with too was, how do people consume content? What are they interested in? How do they find content? Because there's the discoverability side of things that link into it, and it's really quite kind of like a journey that people take with regards to content, and discoverability being kind of the first step, and consuming the content being the last step. But we found the conversation was often around discoverability in particular, is around film and broadcast media, and so we're trying to kind of translate those concepts into what does that mean for arts and culture and performing arts and things like that. And so we found different things about, the type of content people want to create, and other things just situational, like where you are influences what you're watching, which is obvious. If you're on the subway, you're probably watching something that's hopefully PG, maybe PG-13, versus, well, yeah, there's some questionable people on the TTC. Yeah. But so like where you are influences what type of content you're watching or consuming. How much time you have is influencing what type of content you're looking at. Is it a long read? Is it a short video clip? The device that you're using influences what type of content you're using. If it's not mobile friendly, you probably can't watch it on your mobile. Are you watching it on your laptop or something like that? Or are you watching it on some completely other device that I don't know provides content? And there was another one that I can't quite remember now, no, it's gone. It's been a phenomenal process to just kind of think about what that means and how that applies to our sector. So I kind of went on a tangent there, I'm sorry. I just got really excited about those particular findings. Is there any other questions? No? Okay, well, I think for us, I don't know about you, Mila, but it's been a really exciting process to be involved in these sorts of things. We try to be really flexible because we know that things are changing all the time, and these projects are really exploratory. I think one of the things we would say that we've learned, and we've kind of tried to feed back to Candidate Council, and we would feed back to anyone considering these kind of exploratory projects, is to make sure that there are funds built in for that prototyping and that testing kind of phase when you're trying to figure out proof of concept, so that you can maybe bring on board a demo, or you can sign up for a particular subscription service and see if that works for you. And was there anything else? Just involve a broad set of people, start those conversations. For us, some of the success was just making sure that the city and the tourism people and the museum people or the theater people were all in the same room together, and that was a really kind of valuable experience. Did you have any final thoughts?
And then just the as Sarah kind of alluded to, it was like very exploratory, these projects. So it was just even for us in kind of helping to manage the process and kind of bring people through the process, we had to always kind of remember that we as ourselves had to be kind of agile and flexible, because these were new projects. None of us had been through anything like this, and so you just had to kind of go with the flow, and whatever happens, and if it shifted directions or anything like that, you just have to kind of be open to that. And that's it's actually really hard for anyone, and it was particularly hard, I think, in this sector. People kind of felt like they couldn't grasp what was happening sometimes, and you had to kind of coach them through the, like, it's okay, we're just going to go in this direction now and we'll see what happens, you know. So and that's just, it's just like, it's a change in mindset, a change in culture. I think it's just part of that transformation that's happening
Yeah,
through this
that little
process.
bit of uncertainty. So.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks very much. That's us.
Go have a drink.
If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to come up and ask. If you want to hear more about it, we can send you our presentation. But yeah, go have a drink. Enjoy.
Thanks very much.